She survived in darkness. His ancient light changed everything. Sarah's first breath in 3 weeks tasted like rust and cold. Her hibernation pod had failed silently, its emergency release clicking open without lights or sound. For a moment, she lay still in the perfect darkness, listening to her heart thunder against her ribs. The pod should have woken her gently, should have eased her back with warm air and soft lights. Instead, she found herself gasping in what felt like a tomb. "Hello," her voice cracked, barely a whisper. She cleared her throat and tried again. "Hello, pod control." Nothing, not even an echo. Sarah forced herself to think through the hibernation fog. She was in pod chamber 7, level 3 of Sanctuary Station, an underground colony built to house 10,000 people during the surface storms. But right now, she couldn't even see her hand in front of her face. Moving slowly, she gripped the edge of her pod and pulled herself up. The metal was ice cold against her palms. Her legs trembled as she stood, muscles weak from weeks of disuse. The thin medical gown did nothing against the chill. "Anyone," she called again, louder this time. "Emergency response, medical." The darkness swallowed her words whole. Sarah took one careful step, then another, using her pod as an anchor. Her mind raced through emergency protocols. The station had backup generators, redundant power systems. This level of darkness shouldn't be possible. Unless they'd all failed. Her fingers found the small pocket in her gown where her emergency beacon should be. Empty, of course. They'd removed all personal devices before hibernation. Standard procedure for long-term sleep. "Think," she whispered to herself, "think." The pod chamber held 50 units. There had to be others awake, had to be someone else in the dark with her. But as she stood there, straining her ears, she heard no movement, no breathing. No calls for help, just the subtle, constant hum of the ventilation system. Wait, the ventilation was running. That meant some power remained. Somewhere in Sanctuary Station, something still worked. She just had to find it. Sarah knew the layout by heart. 3 years as a structural engineer had taught her every corridor and junction. If she could reach the maintenance shaft, she could follow it to the central power core. Maybe find answers, maybe find help. She was 3 careful steps from her pod when she saw it. At first, she thought her eyes were playing tricks, creating phantom lights in the darkness. But no, there was definitely a warm glow in the distance, barely visible through the chamber's main doorway. It flickered like a living thing, casting long shadows that danced on the walls. Fire? No. The station's fire suppression would have activated even on backup power. This was something else, something steady and controlled. "Hello," she called toward the light, her voice stronger now. "Is someone there?" The glow paused its movement, then it grew larger, brighter, moving toward her. Sarah pressed back against her pod, suddenly unsure. In the darkness, even hope could be dangerous. A man's voice came from behind the light, rough as if from disuse. "Well, you're the first one I've found alive." The light source came closer, an oil lantern, she realized. Ancient technology, its brass housing scratched and worn. The flame inside danced behind glass, throwing warm light in a perfect circle. The man holding it looked as worn as his lantern. He wore maintenance coveralls, stained with grease and marked with the station's logo. His dark hair was wild, his face covered in several weeks' worth of beard, but his eyes were sharp and clear as they found her. "I'm Tom," he said softly, as if trying not to startle her. "Station maintenance, been searching the pods one by one, looking for survivors." Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how exposed she felt in the medical gown. "How long has it been dark?" 26 days. He held the lantern higher, illuminating more of the chamber. Empty pods stretched into the darkness. Power went out all at once, no warning, no explanation. Most of the emergency systems failed right after. Most. Life support still running, bare minimum, enough air, barely enough heat to keep the pipes from freezing. He gestured at the lantern. "Found this beauty in storage. Been using it to search ever since." Sarah took a step toward the light, drawn to its warmth. The others, the rest of the pod chamber. Tom's expression tightened. "You're the first I've found who woke up on their own, most pods. They just kept running on internal power until they died, with their occupants still inside." The implications hit her like a physical blow. Hundreds of pods, thousands of people, all trapped in endless sleep. "We have to wake them," she said. "There has to be a way to." No power means no safe revival sequence. Tom's voice was gentle but firm. Forcing them awake would kill them, you're lucky. Your pod must have had a malfunction that triggered the emergency release. Sarah looked back at her pod at its dark display in Silent Systems. Luck, was that what this was? Here, Tom shrugged out of his outer jacket and held it out to her. You must be freezing. She took it gratefully, wrapping herself in its warmth. It smelled of oil and metal and human warmth, the first familiar thing she'd found in this darkness. Why are you searching the pods? She asked, watching his face in the lantern light. If you can't wake them. Hope, I suppose. He gave her a tired smile. And I couldn't just leave them alone in the dark. Someone had to keep looking. Had to keep a light burning. Something in his voice made Sarah look closer at him. At the shadows under his eyes, the way his hands gripped the lantern like it was anchoring him to sanity. How long have you been walking these corridors alone? 26 days, he repeated softly. Walking, searching, keeping the flame alive. He lifted the lantern slightly, found an old storage room full of oil and wicks. Enough to last months if I'm careful. Sarah reached out and touched his arm, needing to confirm he was real, that this wasn't some hibernation dream. His skin was warm under her fingers. What happened to the power? She asked. What could take down every system at once? Tom's expression changed, something dark passing behind his eyes. That's complicated and not safe to discuss here. He glanced into the shadows beyond the lantern's light. We should move. Find you some proper clothes first, then I'll show you what I've found. What do you mean, not safe? The darkness, he paused, choosing his words carefully. It's not just absence of light, not anymore, sometimes I think. I think something's watching from it, waiting. Sarah wanted to dismiss his words as isolation-induced paranoia, but something in his tone, in the way he held himself, he believed what he was saying. And after 26 days in this darkness, he might know things she didn't. Where can we go? I've set up a safe room not far. He held out his free hand to her. Stay close to the light. Don't look too long into the dark spaces, and whatever you hear, keep moving. Sarah took his hand, warm and calloused against her cold fingers. Whatever I hear. Tom's only answer was to squeeze her hand and start walking, holding the lantern high. They moved into the corridor, where the darkness seemed to press against the bubble of light like a living thing, and somewhere in the perfect black behind them something whispered. The corridors of Sanctuary Station had never felt so vast. Sarah kept close to Tom, their footsteps echoing in the darkness. The lantern light created a golden sphere around them, but it only made the shadows beyond seem darker, hungrier. Watch your step here, Tom murmured, guiding her around a fallen storage crate. Some sections are a mess. People panicked when the lights first went out. Where did they go? Sarah asked, trying not to focus on how their shadows danced on the walls. There must have been hundreds awake when it happened. Tom's pause was heavy with unspoken weight. Most headed for the surface exits, figured they'd take their chances with the storms. His voice dropped lower. None of them made it. The emergency doors sealed when the power died. Couldn't get them open, not even manually. And the others? Scattered through the lower levels looking for working systems, some tried to reach the power core. He adjusted his grip on the lantern. I stopped finding bodies after the second week. Sarah processed this, feeling cold despite his jacket. Stopped finding them because they weren't there anymore. The lantern flame flickered, making shadows jump. At first I thought maybe they'd found other ways out, but then I noticed. He trailed off, shaking his head. Better to show you when we reach the safe room. They turned down another corridor, this one sloping gently downward. Sarah recognized it as one of the maintenance access routes, restricted areas she'd helped design. The air felt different here, heavier somehow. A soft sound echoed from behind them like fabric brushing against metal or whispers just below hearing. Sarah turned to look, but Tom's grip on her hand tightened. Don't, he said quietly. Keep your eyes forward. It's worse if you look at it directly. What is it? I have theories, none of them good. He picked up their pace slightly. The darkness, it's not empty anymore. Hasn't been since about day 3. Sarah wanted to argue, to insist that darkness was just the absence of light, nothing more. But she could feel it now, a weight pressing against their bubble of lamplight, like standing in deep water, feeling pressure from all sides. They reached a heavy maintenance door, its manual lock still functioning. Tom released her hand to work the mechanism, movements practiced and swift. The door opened with a grinding sound that made Sarah wince. "Inside," he whispered, quickly. The room beyond was small but well organized. Tool racks lined one wall, their contents carefully arranged. A makeshift bed occupied one corner, built from storage padding. Supplies were stacked neatly: water containers, emergency rations, spare clothing. But what caught Sarah's attention were the walls. Every available surface was covered in drawings, diagrams, and notes, technical schematics of the station's power systems, maps of the corridors. And everywhere strange symbols she didn't recognize, drawn in what looked like charcoal. Tom secured the door behind them, then moved to a small table where 3 more lanterns sat burning. The combined light made the room almost bright, pushing the shadows into the corners. "Welcome to home," he said, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's not much, but the symbols help keep it safe." Sarah moved closer to one wall, studying the strange markings. They seemed to shift slightly under her gaze, as if drawn in more than just 2 dimensions. "What are they?" "Found them in the old sections, carved into the rock walls. Predate the station by." "Well, by a lot." Tom set his lantern down and began rummaging through a storage container. "They have an effect on whatever's out there. It doesn't like them." He pulled out a set of maintenance coveralls and boots, holding them out to her. "These should fit. There's a screen in the corner for privacy. You'll want proper clothes for what comes next." Sarah took the offered items but didn't move toward the screen. "What does come next, Tom?" "What aren't you telling me?" He sank into a chair, suddenly looking exhausted. The lantern light deepened the shadows under his eyes, making him appear older than he probably was. "The power didn't just fail," he said quietly. "It was taken. Consumed, and whatever did it, I think it's been down here all along, waiting in the rock beneath the station." He ran a hand through his unkempt hair. "We built sanctuary right on top of something ancient. Something that's been trapped in darkness so long it's become part of it." "That's not possible," Sarah protested, but her voice lacked conviction. She'd seen too much in the last hour to dismiss anything completely. 3 years of structural engineering," Tom said, surprising her. "That's your background, right? Sarah Chen, Level 2 certification. You helped design the lower partition seals." "How did you?" "I had access to personnel files. Been reading them, trying to understand." He leaned forward, eyes intense. "Did you ever wonder why the deep sensors kept failing during construction, why the power readings never quite matched the usage stats?" She had. It had been a constant source of frustration during the building phase. Equipment would malfunction for no reason. Power would fluctuate in sealed sections. They'd blamed it on faulty sensors, on mineral deposits in the rock affecting the readings. "It was feeding," Tom continued. "Small amounts at first, just testing, but it got stronger, more aware, and then 3 weeks ago." He gestured at the darkness beyond their room. "It finally got hungry enough to take everything." A scratching sound came from the other side of the door, like claws on metal, or bones being dragged across stone. Sarah instinctively moved closer to the lanterns. "Get changed," Tom said softly. "Rest a bit, eat something, because once I show you what I found in the old tunnels." He looked at the symbols on the walls, their strange angles catching the light. "Once you see that, we'll have to decide whether to run or to fight." Sarah clutched the coveralls to her chest, feeling the weight of darkness pressing against the room's small windows. "Fight what?" "Something that's been hiding in the dark since before humans learned to make fire." Tom's voice was barely a whisper now. "And I think it wants us to join it there." The coveralls fit better than Sarah expected. She pulled her hair back with a band Tom had provided, feeling more human with each familiar motion. The worn fabric smelled faintly of machine oil and metal, the scent of work, of purpose. It helped ground her. "You should eat something," Tom said, offering her a ration pack. "The hibernation fog takes a lot out of you." She accepted it gratefully, settling onto a crate near the lanterns. As she ate, she studied Tom more carefully. Despite his haggard appearance, there was a methodical precision to how he moved, how he kept his supplies arranged. Not the actions of someone who'd lost their grip on reality. "Tell me about the symbols," she said between bites. "How did you find them?" Tom traced one of the markings with his finger. "After the power died, I started exploring the oldest sections of the station. parts that were here before we built Sanctuary. Mining tunnels mostly. He pointed to a particular diagram on the wall, found these carved everywhere, deep cuts in the rock like warnings. Warnings about what's out there. More like instructions. He moved to a different wall, indicating a series of interconnected symbols. Took me days to start seeing the patterns. They're not just random marks, they're a language. A way of pushing back the dark. The scratching sound came again, longer this time, deliberate, like something wanting them to know it was there. It's getting bolder, Tom muttered. Used to just watch, now it tests the boundaries. Sarah set aside her empty ration pack. You said you wanted to show me something, in the old tunnels. Yes, he checked his lantern's oil level, a practiced gesture. But first, you need to understand what we're dealing with, what I've pieced together. He pulled a worn notebook from his pocket, pages stuffed with additional notes and diagrams. The original survey team found these tunnels 30 years ago. Thought they'd struck gold, a perfect location for an underground colony, deep enough to shield from the storms, but not so deep that construction would be impossible. I remember the proposal files, Sarah said. There were some concerns about the rock composition, but nothing serious. Because they ignored the warning signs or didn't understand them. Tom opened the notebook to a specific page. Look at these power consumption readings. From the very first day of construction. Sarah leaned closer, engineering instincts kicking in. The numbers didn't make sense. Energy disappeared from sealed systems. Batteries drained without usage. And in every case, the loss followed a pattern. It's like a heartbeat, she whispered, seeing it clearly now. The power drains, they're rhythmic, living. Exactly, Tom's voice held a hint of approval. Whatever's down here, it feeds on energy. Any kind, electrical, thermal, even, he hesitated, even living energy, human energy. The implications hit her, the missing bodies. Yeah, his expression darkened. I think it learned to take more than just power. But that's not the worst part. He flipped to another page covered in hurried calculations. The drain is accelerating, growing, and I don't think it's just about feeding anymore. What do you mean? It's building something. Converting all that stolen energy into a different form. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. I don't have the right words for it, but I can show you, in the deep tunnels where it all started. He met her eyes. If you're willing to go there. Sarah looked at the door, at the darkness pressing against its edges. Every instinct told her to stay in this circle of light, to wait for rescue that would probably never come. But she was an engineer. She solved problems, and right now this was the biggest problem she'd ever encountered. The symbols, she said, standing, they hold it back. More or less they create boundaries. Places it can't cross easily. He reached into a container and pulled out a piece of chalk-like material. Here, it's made from the same mineral as the original carvings. Draw this one on your sleeve. He sketched a simple symbol on her coveralls, 3 lines intersecting at impossible angles. As she watched, the marking seemed to absorb the light differently than the fabric around it. Think of it like a shield, he said, drawing the same mark on his own sleeve. Not perfect, but better than nothing. Sarah touched the symbol lightly. It felt cold under her fingers despite the room's warmth. How long will they last? Long enough, I hope. He began gathering supplies into a small pack. We'll follow the maintenance shaft down to level 7. That's where the original tunnels start. Where I found, he trailed off, checking his lantern one final time. Found what? The heart of it, the place where darkness learned to think. He offered her a second lantern, freshly filled. Ready. Sarah took the lantern, its warm light steady in her hands. She thought about the thousands of sleepers above them, about the missing bodies, about whatever waited in the deep tunnels below. Tom, she said softly, if we find what's causing this, what's our plan? He checked the symbols on their sleeves, his expression grim. Remember what I said about it being trapped here. Those symbols aren't just a language, they're a prison. He patted his pack. And I've got enough oil to burn down the walls. The scratching outside had stopped. The silence felt expectant, like something holding its breath. Let's go, Sarah said, squaring her shoulders. Show me what's hiding in our darkness. Tom nodded once, then moved to unseal the door. As it opened, their lantern light seemed to catch on the edges of the shadows, creating patterns that shouldn't exist. And somewhere in the depths of Sanctuary Station, something ancient stirred, sensing their intention. The hunt in both directions was about to begin. The maintenance shaft was a tight fit, barely wide enough for them to walk side by side. Their combined lantern light created overlapping circles, but the darkness ahead seemed to swallow the glow more quickly than it should. The deeper we go, the thicker it gets, Tom explained, leading them down. Like the dark has, weight. Substance. Sarah noticed it too. The shadows clung to their boots, reluctant to let go with each step. The air felt dense, almost liquid. How much further? 2 more levels. Then Tom stopped abruptly, throwing out an arm to halt her. Listen. At first, Sarah heard nothing but their own breathing. Then, a sound, like wind through pipes but forming patterns, almost words. Is that? Don't listen too closely, Tom warned. It tries to get in your head, make you hear things you want to hear. As if responding to his words, the sound shifted, becoming eerily familiar. Sarah heard her sister's laugh, her mother's voice calling her name. She gripped her lantern tighter. It's learning, Tom muttered. Getting better at mimicry, wasn't able to do that a week ago. They pressed on, trying to ignore the whispers that followed. The shaft's metal walls gave way to rough stone, the beginning of the original tunnels. Here, the symbols were everywhere, carved deep into the rock. Some were simple, like the ones Tom had shown her. Others were complex webs of interconnected lines that hurt her eyes to look at directly. Stop here, Tom said, setting down his pack. Need to show you something before we go further. He pulled out his notebook, flipping to a page filled with clustered dots and lines. These are power readings from the last 3 weeks. Watch what happens when He overlaid it with another page, this one showing a map of the tunnels. Sarah's engineer mind clicked instantly. The drain patterns. They're following the tunnel layout. Yeah, but look closer, see how the energy moves. She studied the overlaid diagrams and felt her breath catch. The power wasn't just draining, it was flowing. Following specific paths through the rock, like blood through veins. It's building a circuit, she whispered, using the whole station as components. Not just the station, Tom's voice was grim, the sleepers too. All that hibernation energy, all those dreaming minds. He tapped the center of the map. It's all flowing here to the deep chamber. A new sound echoed up the shaft, something between a heartbeat and the hum of a massive transformer. Regular. Mechanical, alive. What happens when the circuit's complete? Sarah asked, though part of her didn't want to know. I think, Tom hesitated, I think it's trying to wake up, really wake up. And it's using our power, our people, to do it. The humming grew louder, making the symbols on the wall vibrate slightly. Show me, Sarah said, straightening. Show me what's down there. Tom nodded, repacking his notebook. Stay close. And Sarah, his eyes met hers in the lantern light. If I tell you to run, you run, no matter what you hear, no matter what you see, promise me. The intensity in his voice made her shiver. I promise. They descended further, the tunnel walls pressing closer. The carved symbols grew more complex, more urgent-looking. Some seemed to move in the corner of her eye, twisting into new patterns when she wasn't looking directly at them. The humming built steadily, becoming a physical presence in their chests. Their lantern flames flickered in time with it, like the whole space was breathing. There, Tom whispered, pointing ahead. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness above. Their lantern light caught on massive pillars of black stone, each covered in spiraling symbols that seemed to pulse with their own dim luminescence. But it was the center of the chamber that drew Sarah's attention, a perfect circle of darkness, darker than the space around it. The stolen power readings pulsed toward it like spokes on a wheel. Gods, she breathed. What is it? A door, Tom said softly, or maybe a window, looking into something that's been waiting a very long time to look back. As if responding to his words, the circle shifted, not moving exactly but changing. Like an eye slowly opening. Sarah felt its attention focus on them, ancient and hungry and terribly, terribly aware. And in that moment she understood why humans had first learned to fear the dark. The darkness in the circle rippled like oil, and Sarah felt a presence press against her mind, ancient, cold, curious. Her lantern flame wavered, drawing inward as if trying to hide. Don't let it focus on you, Tom warned, his voice tight. It gets inside your thoughts, shows you things. Too late, images flooded Sarah's mind. Endless corridors of perfect darkness, the peace of eternal silence, the sweet release of letting go. Her lantern dipped as her arm grew heavy. Tom's hand gripped her shoulder, anchoring her. "Sarah, stay with me." She blinked hard, forcing the visions back. "The sleepers," she gasped. "Is this what they're experiencing?" "Probably it's been. Feeding on their dreams, learning from them." Tom moved them behind one of the pillars, where the carved symbols offered some protection. "But it needs more than just energy now. It needs understanding." The humming changed pitch, becoming almost melodic. In the center of the chamber, tendrils of pure darkness began extending from the circle, testing the air like curious fingers. "Show her," the darkness whispered, using 1,000 borrowed voices. "Show her what you found." Sarah felt Tom tense beside her. "It's never spoken directly before," he muttered. "Getting stronger by the hour now." He reached into his pack and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. As he unfolded it, Sarah saw it was a small stone tablet, covered in the same symbols as the walls but arranged in concentric circles. "Found this near the circle 3 days ago," he said. "It's not just a warning, it's instructions, a key." The tendrils of darkness recoiled slightly from the tablet, creating strange ripples in the air. "The builders of this place," Tom continued, "they didn't just find something down here, they trapped it, used these symbols to create a prison of light and geometry." His finger traced one particular pattern. "This shows how they did it. And maybe how we can end it." "End it how?" Sarah studied the tablet, her engineering mind already trying to decode the patterns. "The symbols channel energy, create boundaries. If we could power them somehow, make them active again." He looked at their lanterns meaningfully. Sarah caught his meaning. "The oil, you want to burn the symbols. Not just burn them, power them. Create a circuit of our own." He pulled out several small containers of lamp oil. "Been saving these, preparing, but I couldn't do it alone." The darkness seemed to gather itself, the tendrils growing thicker, more purposeful. The borrowed voices spoke again, this time using only one Sarah's sister's voice. "Why fight it? There's peace here, rest, an end to all that endless doing." Sarah felt tears sting her eyes at the sound, but forced herself to focus on the tablet. "These patterns, they're like circuit diagrams. Energy flows, control points." "Exactly," Tom's voice held new urgency. "The pillars are the key points, if we can activate them in the right sequence." A tendril of darkness lashed out suddenly, knocking Tom's lantern from his hand. It shattered on the stone floor, the flame guttering out instantly. The darkness surged forward, encouraged by its success. "Now," Tom shouted, already moving. He tossed her several oil containers. "The pillars counterclockwise. Don't let the flame die." Sarah ran for the nearest pillar, her remaining lantern held high. Behind her she heard Tom speaking rapidly, reading symbols from the tablet. The darkness roiled, trying to block her path but retreated from her lantern's light. She reached the first pillar, hands shaking as she poured oil into the deep-carved symbols. The liquid seemed to sink into the stone itself, and when she touched her lantern flame to it, it caught with an eager blue fire. The effect was immediate. The symbols blazed to life, burning with a light that seemed to cut through the darkness like knives. The thing in the circle writhed. "Second pillar," Tom's voice called out. "Quickly." Sarah ran, oil containers clutched tight. Each step felt like moving through deep water as the darkness pressed against her. In her mind, voices whispered promises, secrets, eternal peace. She fought through them, reaching the second pillar. More oil, more fire. More symbols bursting into brilliant life. A scream filled the chamber, not human, not anything that had ever been human. The circle of darkness began to pulse erratically. "Sarah," Tom's voice was strained. "The final pillar. I'll hold it back." She looked back and saw him standing before the circle, holding the tablet up like a shield. The symbols on it were glowing, barely containing the writhing darkness that tried to reach him. The air grew thick as she ran for the final pillar, her lungs burning with effort. The darkness pressed closer, desperate now, showing her visions of power, of knowledge, of her deepest desires fulfilled. "Almost there," she gasped. "Almost." Sarah's hands shook as she poured the last of the oil into the final pillar's symbols. The darkness wrapped around her like cold silk, trying to stop her, to seduce her, to drag her into its endless depths. "Sarah," Tom's voice cut through the whispers. "Whatever you see, whatever it offers, remember the sleepers, remember why we're here." The thought of thousands dreaming above, slowly being drained into this ancient hunger, gave her strength. She pressed her lantern flame to the oil-filled grooves. The third pillar ignited. The effect was catastrophic. Blue fire raced through the symbols, connecting all three pillars in a triangle of burning light. The darkness recoiled with a sound like tearing metal, its tendrils whipping frantically through the air. "The tablet," Tom shouted over the chaos. "The final sequence." He began reading symbols aloud, his voice echoing with strange harmonics. The burning patterns on the pillars shifted, responding to his words, forming new configurations that hurt Sarah's eyes to look at. The circle of darkness contracted violently, then expanded, sending out waves of pure shadow that made Sarah's lantern sputter. She pressed herself against the final pillar, feeling the heat of its burning symbols through her coveralls. "You cannot," the darkness howled in 1,000 voices. "You are nothing, motes of dust. Temporary flames." "We're human," Tom growled, still reading. "We crawled out of caves and learned to make fire. We looked at the dark and said no more." Sarah felt something building in the chamber, a pressure like the moment before lightning strikes. The burning symbols began to pulse in sequence, faster and faster, creating patterns of light that cut through the darkness like wounds. The circle writhed, its perfect roundness distorting. "You need us," it whispered, using her sister's voice again. "The void between stars, the peace of endless night. Without us, you're alone in the light." "We're not alone," Sarah said, understanding flowing through her like the fire through the symbols. "That's what you never understood. We have each other." She looked at Tom, saw him nod slightly. Together, they spoke the final symbol sequence, her engineering mind seeing the pattern, his knowledge making the words real. The pillars erupted with blinding light. The burning symbols lifted off the stone, hanging in the air like constellation maps. They began to spin, forming a new circle, a circle of fire and human defiance that opposed the dark one at the chamber's center. The thing in the darkness screamed, not in pain but in sudden, terrible comprehension. "Now," Tom yelled, "the lantern." Sarah understood instantly. She hurled her lantern into the center of their burning symbol circle. Tom's tablet flared with impossible light as he thrust it forward like a blade. Light and darkness met in an explosion of power that threw them both backward. Sarah felt reality twist around her as two opposing forces tried to occupy the same space. Then, with a sound like the universe taking a breath, the darkness imploded. The circle collapsed in on itself, taking the screaming voices and cold promises with it. The burning symbols followed, pursuing it into whatever dimension it called home, sealing the breach behind it. Silence fell. Sarah lay on the stone floor, breathing hard, spots dancing in her vision. Every symbol in the chamber had gone dark. Even the pillars were just stone again. "Tom," she called out, her voice rough. "Tom." Here, his response was weak but clear. She found him propped against one of the pillars, looking exhausted but alive. "Dead boys." "Look," Sarah pointed upward. Far above, emergency lights were blinking on, their soft red glow probably spreading throughout the station. "Power's returning, it's gone." "Not gone," Tom corrected, struggling to sit up straighter. "Contained, sealed away, like it was before." Sarah helped him to his feet, both of them leaning on each other for support. "The sleepers should start waking soon now that it's not draining them." He managed a tired smile. "Going to be a lot of confused people wondering why the backup generators took so long to kick in." "Let them wonder," Sarah said, looking at the now empty center of the chamber. "Some kinds of darkness are better left forgotten." Tom's hand found hers, warm and solid and real. "We should get back, help with the revival process." "In a minute," Sarah said softly, squeezing his hand. Let's just stay in the light a moment longer." They stood together, watching the emergency lights grow stronger overhead. Somewhere above, thousands of people were about to wake up to a new day. They would never know how close they'd come to endless night, or understand why they sometimes shivered at shadows. But in the deep chamber, a structural engineer and a maintenance worker held hands and smiled, knowing they'd kept the darkness at bay for at least one more generation. And in the station above, dawn was breaking on the surface, sending the first rays of true sunlight down through the ventilation shafts, chasing away the last lingering shadows of ancient hunger. From their joined hands, warmth spread like the first fire humans ever kindled. The emergency lights strengthened overhead, casting soft red patterns that pushed the lingering shadows further into the corners of the ancient chamber. "Listen," Sarah whispered. Above them, through layers of rock and metal, the station was waking up. The gentle hum of returning power, the distant hiss of ventilation cycling clean air. And something else, the first confused voices of sleepers rising from their long dark dreams. Tom's thumb traced small circles on her palm, a quiet reminder of connection. "We should document this place," he said softly. "The symbols. The pillars leave warnings for the next generation." "Let's leave hope too," Sarah answered, thinking of his lantern light cutting through weeks of darkness, searching for survivors. "Tell them how humanity faced the dark and chose to burn brighter." They turned away from the empty circle together, their footsteps echoing in the chamber that had seen the birth of shadow and its rebirth into light. The burning symbols had left trace patterns in the stone, not prison bars now, but a testament. A reminder that even the deepest dark could be challenged by those willing to carry the flame. As they walked toward the tunnel that would lead them back to the waking world, Sarah felt the weight of Tom's jacket still around her shoulders. It smelled of oil and metal and human warmth, no longer the only familiar thing in a world of darkness, but a promise of things to come. Above them, dawn continued to break over Sanctuary Station. Its light filtered down through crystal sheets and ventilation shafts, touching places that had known only shadow for centuries. And somewhere in the dreams of newly waking sleepers, the memory of an ancient hunger began to fade, replaced by the simple miracle of opening your eyes to find the darkness gone, and someone's hand holding yours in the light. In the deep chamber behind them, the pillars stood silent witness to what had passed. Their carved symbols held their secrets, waiting for the next generation of light bringers. But for now, they were just stone again, marking a battlefield where humanity had reminded the void of an ancient truth. We are not afraid of the dark anymore. We learn to make fire instead.